Sheila here. This is Sirius Stellus Moon, and it's Jupiter hour, Jupiter day. And a little bit of an energy reading. First of all, the moon is applying to conjunct Pluto, so that we are heading towards the monthly emotional transformation from the core. And yesterday, after I was giving the energy reading, I was trying to love myself. So there's an energy that was doing all kinds of weird occult things, but before that, it could even be just loving somebody else, and even beautifully loving somebody else, um, and trying to love either parts of themselves or love themselves. And there's certain, there could be a situation where, maybe some of the people are somewhat neurodivergent, or how should I say that? Or the type of love that one needed was not, let's say, romantic love. And there can be an issue of either the juxtaposition of the people, or the issue of one person to feel and receive love, but also there was another person that were trying to love themselves through loving the other person. Now, there's nothing wrong with being kind and generous and friendly and loving, um, and that is not going to replace self-love. And then they were trying to go about self-love, and here I want to be very, very graceful, because people usually try a lot of things. So it's not that everything that they did, and I wasn't exposed to everything that they did, but the reason I was shown that is because they were doing dark occult things to try to isolate a person from their surrounding. Okay, be controlling in that sense. Like, here is a huge difference. When we have, let's say, friends, sometimes a friend could say that, hey, you're meeting that person and you return depressed, doom and gloom, and feeling lonely. So that's like, it's not about don't meet that person. It's kind of like, hey, something's happening to you when you're next to that person. And that's self-awareness. Now, when this is meeting, let's say, a person in the Masons, and then, hey, you come to meetings with that person, then you have, I don't know, all kinds of sexist jokes. Um, and then the awareness, because some people are more sensitive to energy of people, and they may become like the other person, but completely. And so, being aware of what do other people bring within the self, and opting for the people that one can enjoy being oneself around, can increase self-awareness. Now, it can also create a situation where the person that told you that brings things within you that you're not really able to handle, or not wanting to handle, and that's very okay. Another thing is um, to try to isolate people on purpose for people that are actually good for them. And I got a vibe like that in the collective. So I don't know who was doing that to whom. Okay, they were trying to literally put a person into a trauma situation by being isolated, but from good people, from people that cared about him. And it might not be the same person. Okay, so it's just a collective of energies. So take it, how do they say, take it as it resonates? So, um, isolating a person from the people that are good for them was meant kind of like an MK Ultra. Um, it was a dark occult practice to make the person more susceptible to try to steal something of the essence of a person. Now, whether that was connected or not, it may have been that somebody was trying to love themselves and practicing these practices to get that quality of self-love from the person. So, um, however, these practices of isolating someone also go to psychic attack and even sexual boundary violation to get to the essence of the part, because this is the dark occult practice. And the part that they were trying to get is the part that loves themselves. So, okay, let's just, without shame, look at the mechanism of what happened here and see that underneath you see, usually when people are doing horrible things, underneath that, the motive, underneath that, even if their motive, their surface motive was not at all innocent, the motive internally is very innocent. It's to love oneself, to be creative, um, to be liked, or okay. But the practice, the way that they try to achieve that, is negating. And this is why they say that black or dark magic or dark occult has repercussion, or unethical magic has repercussion, because they're trying to love themselves or be appreciated and loved by doing the very things that would undermine their sense of self. Because, okay, there's nothing wrong with fake it till you make it. It's completely different from trying to get into another person's essence and become them by mimicking them. What they encounter is even more, the person is trying to do that. So the person who's psychically attacked will feel like they are not themselves, which again would, and now the person is trying to be them, again, a very philosophical way that's incredibly practical, is going to feel like they are not themselves, because that's what they created. Okay, and so now here, some of you that were psychically attacked, um, and mind you, the people that are doing those things, they were severely psychically attacked, either in their childhood or continuously after that. So they're just continuing a certain trajectory, like a cult of personality or something. But the thing is that these are undermining patterns, and some of you that were psychically attacked, or some of you have Pisces either as the seventh house, the fifth, or the eighth house, which would mean, hey, that's coming from the partner, which usually is the side of you that you don't immediately enact. It's kind of like people say it's the shadow side, or the side of you that is, and seventh house is mirror. Some of you are like Virgo ascendants. I'll say it outright, okay? And I don't know all the ascendants of all the energies, but because this is where the seventh house is the mirror image. But it's the mirror image, how should I say, if there's, it's kind of like your pets sometimes look like you. Okay? I was doing a cat sitting a couple of years ago to a lady and her husband, and I looked at the interaction between the cats, and I'm like, that guy's playing her husband, that's her. And she actually had to be that cat that is courted. And okay, she was a relationship coach, and she had to learn how to be that cat that is courted. And the other cat had, on the other hand, because they had to deal with a person who is almost disbelieving that they're liked, um, they had to really court, and sometimes being ignored with that other cat. So those interactions, um, might be there between people, and for many people, they're just trying to be that person. And for many people, now some of you have Pisces 7th house, and those of you that feel psychically attacked and are not attacking, okay, um, have Pisces placements. Why do I say Pisces or something of that sort? Or Gemini and Virgo can also be, but Pisces placement, because Pisces has a natural component to their personality that is malleable, but is not themselves. And so on a shadow work level, the person who's psychically attacked might need to renew the understanding or learn to understand that their malleable self is not them not being themselves. It can, and that can really confuse the other people around them. But that's Pisces. Pisces is the ocean water. If you take a cup of the ocean, okay, then now that ocean is within a cup. So it is one thing. But if you pour that cup into, I don't know, a petri dish, then now that water is a petri dish. But that doesn't mean that the water is not the water. Now, particularly those of you who have like because some of you might see the quality of that person to be the water. Some of you may have Mars even in Pisces, and some of you may see the quality of that person of being the water. Because, for example, in martial arts, to be the water is something that is aspired to, and or if you are an actor, okay, Pisces is aspired to, because this is the ability to become whatever the container is, or to channel into your container whatever the other person is. And some of you maybe even are doing acting roles, and they're trying to, and some of you might even be working for MK Ultra, and they're trying to psychologically understand things, whether it's in acting or whatnot. Then the quality of the Pisces to just, and what's the thing with the water? You throw, I don't know, you throw a cup of tea into the water, and the water just melts with the cup of tea. Okay, and so some of you might try to, how should I say that? You try to have that quality of the Pisces to just absorbs things, and yet the water is the water. The cup of tea is not going to stay there forever. They're just going to be themselves, okay? And so it's the malleable quality of Pisces that make it very challenging to psychically attack them for a long time, but many people try. Um, some of you might want the poetic or artistic tendencies, and everybody has Pisces in their chart, so maybe looking at an astrology chart might be useful. Um, for some people, Pisces can be associated with the quality of um, relaxing into being, although they're not necessarily relaxed. But this is the part where we surrender something, and it has an erotic quality as well. And some of you are envious of that erotic quality, or some of you naturally has this erotic quality, but have a challenge around expressing that. Okay, it's particularly the Chiron Pisces, because they have this Chiron opposing Pluto and sometimes Uranus and like a lot of things, and may even have that co-present with Lilith. And so some of you may find, or you might think that that person has the ability to just surrender into an erotic experience, and but in trying to practice those dark occultistic things, You try to take the quality of being able to do that while trying to take all the other things, and that negates the ability to do that. Okay, that's the thing with those dark occult practices. That it's kind of like, it's not about the way justifying or not justifying the means. Even it's just the way is under the means are undermining the desired outcome. And this is why people will have those extreme repercussions, um, because they're taking extreme. And think about it, people sexually assault a person because they want their ability to sleep good. What are you going to get? People, it's basically people target an individual to get all their good qualities, and then they're like, the most they will get is like them becoming targeted individuals, because that's what they created when they. It's a and it's a different process to the process of attunement. So, and um, and this is how those coping mechanisms basically work. Now with the Chiron issue, um, some of you have Lilith and Chiron, and some of you is just Chiron. Um, that that is something that necessitates. How should I say that? It means that whenever you're trying to experience yourself in an erotic surrender, a wound comes up. And unfortunately, a lot of those people were ritually abused. And in ritual abuse, people have to also perpetuate, and there can be a lot of shame around that. So, and also I want to stress something that first of all, some of the qualities that people try to take from others are projected qualities. And particularly with the Pisces, okay, the Pisces can surrender into when something is safe for them. So some of you might even begin to be a safe container, okay, and the Pisces began to melt into, and then you crave the quality of the Pisces that are able to melt into something. And so that can even express itself almost in a gender seeming way, and that can be where, you're like, hey, that person can melt into me, why can't I? And it's kind of like, hey, that person wants to be the melting partner. Okay, it's like, hey, if you want to be the melting partner, you might need, either you can have a situation where that person is a safe container to you, but also you need to authentically see what are the needs of one another on the long term, and what are the needs of one another in the sense that, maybe that person has a need that they could be very thirsty for, okay, that need to have a secure container to melt into on a consistent basis, or on a more consistent basis, and then a person has to be authentic with themselves. Do they want to be that container? Do they want to be that safe place? Do they want to be the outer spoon or the inner spoon? Okay. Do they want to be the person that the one that the other person is melting into, um, and kind of like, surrendering into the erotic experience, or do they want to be that melting into the erotic experience themselves? And there's always a little bit of both, but people are going to have to understand themselves erotically, and that can pertain to something that either looks like a gender issue but isn't, or something that has to do also with the gender. And even with the gender, it's kind of like, hey, they have to understand it's people that you want to be the outer spoon, you want to be the inner spoon. Okay. um, and another thing is that when those erotic qualities are not projected, then it might mean for some of you that the person that somebody tries to take that quality from, it's not about taking that from somebody, but having that. And this is important. Okay, there's a different, for example, somebody, I don't know, steals something from someone. There's some people are just like wanting the other not to have that, and some of those are just like wanting to have that. And the energies that I felt was usually wanting to have that. Um, and there were also other energies that are like wanting the other one not to have that as well. And for some it might be juxtaposed. It's wanting to have that and wanting for the other one not to have that as well. Now, that can come particularly from Aquarius placements, which is about wealth redistribution. And the wealth redistribution, it can be from, oh, taken from the rich, given to the poor. Um, but it's not. It's about. But when they are trying to do that with dark occult practices, they're negating what they want to take from the supposed wealthy or the supposed rich. And wealthy can simply be, self-love. In that sense, um, the person that they're trying to take from really spend a lot of time developing that quality, and what that creates is a trajectory where that energy is not easily digested by those who try to take that, and their means are undermining the quality, whether it's erotically relaxing into a situation, or whether it is um, being shiny and radiant and self-confident. Here, if people are self-confident when they take accountability of the many things they did and so on. Um, and some people really worked both. They had to, let's say, point the boundary or the aggressive energy to set a boundary to those that psychically attacked them and sexually or ritually abused them. Very, very simply put, because psychic attack is ritual abuse as well. Um, and they had to do things that are very intense to set a clear boundary, and they had to spend their years understanding. It's kind of like a person that came back from the war and they had to do certain stuff. Now, some of the stuff that they had to do are against their morals, but they had to do them because the other side doesn't have any morals, and some of the stuff is against their morals. And have, or is, with the war, some of the stuff can be illegal orders. Um, and with the people that project certain things onto themselves through another, then people might be finding themselves in certain situations where it's like, hey, what's happening? Until I don't say this to this person, you're a Nazi criminal, da 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 da, nothing happens. And then it's like taking a step back, and it's kind of like, well, like, you can decide if you're staying a Nazi criminal, or I don't know, you change your course of action. So what is and it's not about that being easy, but for the targeted individual, it was not easy either. They may not have grown into the life circumstances, but for some cases, there were even satanic ritual abuse survivors that did. Okay, so that is also something. Um, it can also be something in the environment of the person that one wants to have, like their friends or their family, or okay, the support, and then they can be having a reality check about that thing. Um, which can mean many things. They can say, okay, that's not what I thought, but hey, it's still good to have that, or it's not as terrible as I thought, or hey, that's terrible, but it also has that other facet, which initially maybe made them want to have that. Now, in some cases, some people even saw themselves the savior of the targeted individual, only to find out that the targeted individual, while they may have even needed saving, again with Pisces, sometimes Pisces does need saving, like, let's just face that, they also not a complete victim. And it doesn't mean that they didn't need saving, okay? Because we are talking about situations where certain, now for some people, they put the people in a situation where they would need saving and then saved them, and then they try to love themselves as the person that they did that to. While the person that they did that to may have spent even decades developing those traits. So it's not about fairness or unfairness, because it's definitely unfair that people are tortured and put in situations where they feel shame about just being. It's not fair. And then some people come out of it, and the people that didn't come out of it, whether because of the unfairness that they weren't exposed to the nervous systems of people that did come out of it on a consistent basis, or they were supposed to assassinate these people, um, then hey, that it's true that that is not fair. Also, when they do those rituals to try to get at the quality of the person, they don't actually get at what, and this is what people call the shadow work. And so what they're asking for is the access to come out of this, the ritual abuse that they are perpetuating. And perhaps to set that intention, okay, can be a yielding thing. Because they, that is, and people will try to turn their intention over because they also did it to others, and then there are all kinds of situations that happen, but all in all, what's working in their favor is that their actions do bear consequences, even if those consequences are invisible. So when their malefic action bear consequences, they can say, hey, but give me an actual way to access those traits. And that authenticity can yield better ways that are not abusive to get at those traits that are desired, whether it's to love oneself or to erotically be able to erotically immerse, which would need safe relations. Okay, changing the secret societies. You know, if people grew up in an MK Ultra environment that eradicated humanity from humanity to supposedly preserve only those who would sell everything and everyone to get what supposedly they want, and what they want is to be loved by those everyones that they want to sell, okay, or to love themselves, which you understand, like you understand the challenge, but because those actions begin to bear spiritual consequences, they have an opportunity to say, let's say they put in, I don't know, spiritual jail or whatever they call it, whatever, okay, um, then they can say, hey, you locked me down here, I was just trying to love myself. Now they're beginning to open possibilities to gain access to something that would eventually lead to that self-love. This is where this is the how the wealth redistribution actually works, because the wealth redistribution is also about, certain people spend decades, you know, think about, if I wanted to explain astrology, if somebody wanted the quality of being able to know astrology like me, even if I would channel them the things that I understand, they would need to study. They would need to spend some time receiving downloads from me to begin to understand, and they will also develop their own understanding. Okay, so because they would have their own thing to contribute and to renew and so on. So just like normal teaching. And if somebody tried to do weird stuff to get the astrology knowledge that I have, and they just ran into astrology, very likely they're not going to get it, and they're also going to interfere with their frequency in getting that. So not all things can be immediately Robin Hooded. Okay, for example, um, if I try to be the owner of 3 mansions right now today, I would need to do some things to make the process of ownership of a state more simplified. Whether it's using technology, whether it's changing the taxation system, whether it's understanding a bit about architectures, which architectures are more preferred for me. Okay, I would need certain type of quantum leap, but it would also necessitate me understanding, some things that I can't immediately outright jump into. Okay, so for some, they would try to, for even if, for example, if I would want to go off grid and build like a cabin, I would need to build that cabin. I would need a place to stay until I learn how to live in those conditions and improve upon them. So there are the normal challenges of house ownership or of having a home. There are also the things like, purifying the energy of the home, the things that are genuinely challenging, and yet um, those are trajectories. At the same time, it can be that the people who are occupying real estate are doing satanic ritual abuse in children that is malefic to the real estate, and there are many, many people that their job is, a part of their life is going to be about changing that. And they would need both to learn the practices of having a home or even owning a home ownership while changing those trajectories. Um, and so in that case, it's not just about, oh, well, let's steal a home. You have to change the entire system. Now, some of these people already know and understand and tend to that. If you have been one of the people that, let's say, was in between houses, particularly because in housing there was a lot of sex and child trafficking, many Epstein rings now, that has to do with real estate. It goes to the vibe of the houses. And people try to literally sexually assault me as I speak about that. So for some of you, imagine that you were looking for housing yourself, and then you had to deal with, changing the trajectory of houses being to do with human trafficking. Many people are on that line, and they could be even in houses and the energy doesn't feel right, and they don't know how to explain that to others. And it's like, hey, what is with that person? They don't want a solution. They don't, and they are just sensitive, energy sensitive to those frequencies. And then people try to psychically attack them so they wouldn't expose the information, which causes them to mingle with those energies that hide that information and get that information. It's not that they are penetratively getting that information, something tried to penetrate them, that something is involved with Epstein-like stuff, and then, okay, the and then they set the boundary to that person. Is already a beginning of a trajectory to set the boundary to the pedo ring called of real estate. Now, what happened? It began with some sort of an encounter, and then the part that does the dark occult stuff, which is closer to the Epstein than the psychically attacked person who escaping Epstein's and their energies encounter, and you know what? They might even like each other when it's not about psychic attack. They might even like each other, and what happens is that which tries to use dark occult to be that person or to be in the light or to love themselves or to I don't know what is now the dark practices are exposing all their secrets. Particularly if they put people through sexual, because even if they create confusion, they can only create confusion around the frequencies that are somewhat similar to their frequencies. And if they take on a face of another person, they can try to bring that to their frequencies, but it's going to be like a babushka. Okay? What happened with the babushkas, those Russian dolls? You turn them to the side and then they up. Turn it to the side, they go up. and the person is psychically attacked is like that babushka. And the person that's psychically attacking is trying to take the babushka down. But it's a babushka, just just like you, and then they're like they have to be very intense, like no, I'm going to keep that person down. Okay, but now you don't have the energy that you wanted from them. How was Annika Lucas released, smuggled out of a Peter ring, doing horrid rituals, and then the person that was doing the rituals said to Annika Lucas, the child, well, you're dead, you're not useful, you're like dead, which was a projection because they took her life force. And then she was smuggled through that out of the cult. By a person that also raped her and then had to go through a huge trajectory. And so what's happening right now, because of the juxtaposition of Dark Ages, Golden Ages, before the splitting of the timelines, or during the splitting of the timelines, we're talking 300 years that the Dark Ages are going to dissipate and we're going to be left only with the Golden Ages. And we're talking, and of course time is not linear. The people that are Golden Ages are just Golden Ages now. And so what those encounters are having closer and closer frequency to Golden Ages. This is also where psychiatric diseases that people thought are incurable become like, hey, listen to the patient and like allow them to be themselves, and whatever they're gonna do for profession, they're gonna decide what it is. Okay, when people try to sex traffic a person, remember those people that say sex work is work? So that's exactly the thing. If a person is not meant to do sex work, it's not their job. And if a person is meant to do something like sexual positive sexual education that could look like sex work, they're just going to do that in their way. And if you try to coerce somebody to do that in another way, then they're just going to list to you the list of ailments that you create in your own body, all the way down to the bone marrow. And the funny thing is that the people that try to do that are these Masonic rites that were taught that they would have the blessing of bone marrow, of being able to completely escape the medical karma of what they do. I don't know how it works with the curses there, but it doesn't seem to quite work, because this is a cult of treason, and the treason is to the bone, which means that some of these people have bone diseases. Now, there was a time where their spouses would have that. Now, that can be a situation where, and this is why they're asked to sell everyone they love, because everybody around them will have those implications. Now, some of these people were juxtaposed, and there is a push-pull. I was talking about that in another video. There's a push-pull, because it's kind of like, hey, even the person within the cult doesn't want the other person to suffer, knowing that by being in the vicinity they will. But then in towards golden ages, that other person's kind of like, anyway, they need to tend to the secret societies and dissolve those structures of curses, of treason, of of those trajectories, because for them, maybe they have Aries or Neptune associated temporarily or not with their partner house or partner related significations, which means that in that case you tend to the affairs of the bigger planet, which further exposes all the secret of those who practice those dark occult practices, and they will need to update in the sense that either they go to the dark ages, but they can't have of the light of people who represent the golden ages, or they begin to transmute darkness. And here, for example, um, how should I say that? Okay, I'll explain it in a different way. I have Uranus in the 10th house, co-present with Ketu, which means that if there was a past incarnation or past life, or even in my younger days, I was exposed to astrology, but never really thought I would be an astrologer. That kind of vicinity to astrology gave me certain time. It's kind of like, they say you need to spend 10,000 hours to develop a skill. And so you think about a person who's kind of like, that's just luck cookie. That's just this, that's just that. And then reading another book, and another book, and another book, and another book. And not even paying attention to the fact that they're accumulating those 10,000 hours. Then they come to actually listen to an astrology course for maybe the first time in their lives. And Uranus, they have clear cognizance that was achieved by accumulating, these 10,000 hours, or that they learned something about scientific patterns that astrology is just another language too. And now it looks like, what's that person that we just saw in the community beginning to say all these things, and they speak so confidently? And for some people, it can simply be that they have a past life that they're reconnecting with. It's still going to take the dedication. But particularly if they have like a shame around, let's say, being an astrologer, then they accumulate those hours, not paying attention that they have accumulated those hours, and then boom, they are an astrologer. So if another person listened to them and just saw them in their last 6 months or last 2-3 years, and they say, oh, they're going to do a dark practice to get that trait of being an astrologer, they won't be able to digest all the information that does take years to study. Or they would need to have an equivalent um, expertise that allows them to delve into the understanding in the language of astrology. Okay, let's say if I speak very good English, there's some old English words that I would need to study, but all in all, I could read Beowulf in Old English with a translation easier than a person who has Kirill letters background. That they would need to study the whole Latin alphabet. On the other hand, a person that was grown Bulgarian, they would be able to read Russian literature quicker than a person who was born American. Because the Kirill letters they have, they just need maybe different pronunciation or different use of the Kirill letters. And so, in that sense, it's more challenging to Robin Hood on a frequency, not because of fairness, okay, not because it's not a fair thing that people will have the wealth redistribution of knowledge, but because um, they would need to understand what they're seeing and to develop their own understanding. So, for example, when I was doing a channeling experiment, there were a lot of faculties of knowledge that I was exposed to, and then um, when some of that kind of like tried to use or manipulate me, I was just like, well, I still have the astrology. I can channel, but I can still look at the chart and read it, and that unnerved a lot of energies that I did take to develop the astrology skill. Unnerved a lot of energies because some of them were certain that if they give me the channelings, then they are the mastermind and I am the visible puppet. I think a lot of people have that with politicians. They assume that politicians or business people don't really know what they're talking about, and particularly with this Pluto transit in Aquarius, the beginning, the coming eclipses, some of them are going to find out that even when you take the power, even when the puppeteer takes the power and sort of abandons the politician maybe sometimes for the first time in their life can do their job. Okay? Or when the puppeteering becomes visible, then even the visibles, because they see a trajectory. When people ask, hey, can AI replace the head of NATO? Then people begin to ask themselves a lot of questions about the trajectory. So, thank you. Um, so what is happening is that people begin to take their sovereignty. And and in that sense, there are people that were thinking, oh, we're gonna leave that, we're gonna not puppeteer that. Let's see what they can do. And I was like, they can do. Think about the time when there was democratization. Oh, we're gonna leave that to the people. It will never be. It will never that. We're still dealing with democratic regimes. There is lobbying. There is this. There is that. We're having elections in October 2025 in Netherlands, in Israel. I don't know about United States. Okay, many other countries. We're still, that people still, and if people are not wanting to go to the vote thingy because they don't believe in democracy, it's because of the lobbying and the financiers, not because not because of the representation, but they actually want to be represented. So the prediction that the people are too stupid to have a democracy is not really working. In fact, they're too smart. They want something to actually represent them and is actually inclusive. That being said, if the people are, the old shamanic teaching goes, where a woman cannot live safe and free, it would be disaster after disaster. It's a old as Sedna. And why a woman? Because usually she would deal with all the projections. They would try to make her have a disability and then complain that she doesn't do anything. And so she like it, women are associated with the moon, so it's kind of like they would get all the reflections of society. Okay, it's not necessarily only a woman, but that's a good litmus test in a society that's not matriarchal. In matriarchal society, you would have to ask about men, about people with disability, about you know um, children, of course. Yes, there's a child able to be a child. Thank you. More things that are coming up. Yeah, those trajectories and those dark occult practices, what they lead is to disclosure and exposure. Okay, the people that were hurt by Epstein's begin to publish the lists of names themselves. Now, what about the handlers? And then it leaves it kind of like, well, domino. The first part of the domino is falling out. The second part of the domino is those people on the list have an opportunity to say, hey, we had handlers. Those are the handlers. We were put into psychotic or psychic attack state, and then we were forced to perpetuate that. And still, children, we could they kind of become. Some of them have the trajectory to become the satanic ritual abuse survivor that speaks about things. Okay, the doors are being opened slowly but surely to exit violence. And the repercussions for abuse of power and those dark occult practices begin to be more and more evident. And people try to have more and more intensity. Again, attempts to sexually assault me as I say that. People have more and more intensity about, and that intensity is kind of, a person goes to, hey, banish predators or child sex offenders, try to take the essence of the child. Now, it's basically an adult person that never got to have a childhood tries to take the essence of being a child. But they're basically trying to reconnect with their inner child that they never really had access to. A state of being safe, or a state of being loved, or whatever they project onto that child. A state of being psychic aware and safe. Because a lot of these people are incredibly psychic. They were inbred to be psychic. But then they were put under mind control. And so this is why some of those juxtapositions or encounters, and there's also another thing. What one can see, doesn't necessarily mean they interpret it correctly. Okay? Um, and this is where people would go to, banish predators and ignite I don't know, healthy connection. They see people from Utah in the comments. Again, attempt to sexually assault me as I say that. They see people from Detroit in the comments. Now they begin to see the real estate, the location. Location, location, location. I need to see the where is Utah, because it's probably some lovely scenery with a lot of natural resources. Yo, Navo. Would that, if it's one of the nations of NATO, would that be considered Article 5? It has to be outside of that. And the Dutch is like, not Utah? Then Bosch. NATO freedom from the MK Ultra dumb fuckery, and there are the people with the people that talk. Intergenerational sometimes. But you see, it says like, oh, but that person, but that children, Epstein. It's like a dog that folds their tail. It's like, no, don't fold your tail. Get out of those Epstein trajectories and stop representing the offenders, not holding them accountable. You're meant to do that. The people that you psychically attack see that you're meant to do that. They weren't eyeing your profile, your Instagram profile, for several years. Is it going to do something about that? Is it going to do something about that? While you're having other people's arguments with people through, okay? So it can't be an image. And yeah, it gets to that level. It gets to that level. Now, some of them are like, jealous of one another, wanting to take the traits of one another, copying one another. But some of them have the natural traits of, hey, that's wrong, knowing that what they did, but they may also have done some, But the issue is not to fold your tail, but to hold yourself accountable and become and change the trajectory so that you can actually face up to those things that you throw in the air. You can't say, but that children, and then like the Me Too went too far. Doesn't work together. The children is the Me Too. It's the children that became adults that were okay. It doesn't. You're gonna have to deal that from the cradle to the grave. You're gonna have to deal with what the government did from the cradle to the grave. Um, so particularly if somebody's eyeing politics and um, and the people that are now the people that are psychically attacked. And here's the thing: those people might not even be full aware of their trajectory. Other people either project the trajectory onto them or are fully aware and they try to take that from them, which is why they traffic people. They choose the people or the children to try to take their ideas, trajectories, skill, and use that and then try to diminish the value of that other person, and that plays along giving them value and then trying to take it away so that they would be controllable. But what happens is that people grow to understand themselves and like, hey, I'm not that. Hey, that actually is true. That actually is not true. And authentically accept themselves. Now, some people feel like they've been bitten by a snake when they're, but that's exactly the trajectory that would, these people that would make themselves very present, and then when there is a response to their presence, it's like they were bitten by a snake. Like, what were you expecting there to happen? You're putting your presence constantly there. What did you think would happen? Okay, and for example, one moment when I got called out Yesterday I was watching a short about girls that would send guys the filthiest texts while just, I don't know, eating a meal casually. And I was like, I knew what I was called